Okay, today, today, we are going to be talking about 15 verses for strength, courage, and faith in life's hard places. And yeah, without any further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so apparently my actual microphone doesn't work. So now I have to use my cam's mic. It's what it is. All right, technical issues. Fun. Shows you how inept I am. Okay, anyways, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about 15 verses for strength, courage, and faith when life is hard or in the hard places. Yeah, so we'll get right into it without any further ado. All right, first up, Deuteronomy, chapter 31, verse 6. And this one's like how God goes with you into the unknown, right? So be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid or scared of them, for Yahweh, your God, himself is with you. He goes with you. He will not fail nor forsake you. So this verse was written by Moses, and he was speaking to the Israelites when they were just on the edge of the promised land, right? And Moses is about to pass his leadership over to Joshua. And yeah, the situation they're in is like they're going to end up facing fortified cities and enemies that are much stronger than them, right? So, I mean, in that sense, this verse makes a lot of sense for the situation they're in, right? And so theologically, what Moses is trying to say here is strength comes from God's presence, right? Not personality, not rah, look at me, I'm huge. It's God, it's purely God, right? And another thing is that God promises never to abandon his people. I mean, it's right there. He's not going to forsake you, right? And that fear has no final authority when God stands beside you, right? Like fear doesn't really stand a chance at all. And courage is definitely rooted in the certainty that God is with you. It's not an emotion, okay? So why does this verse matter? I mean, people often overlook Deuteronomy. But I find that this is a very empowering verse because it speaks to people standing right at the edge of change, right? I mean, think about it. Israel is about to enter a new season of their lives, and a season of battling giants and unknowns, and their leader who's been leading them the whole way out of Egypt, Moses, is stepping down, right? And Joshua stepping up, and everything familiar is shifting in their world, right? And into that moment of fear and insecurity, God says, be strong and courageous, for I go with you, right? And this verse reminds us that courage doesn't come from like denial. Israel wasn't imagining giants. They were real, right? The fear was real, but God's presence was more real, right? And many people believe courage means feeling brave, but it's more than that. Like, I think biblical courage means trusting God even when you don't feel brave, right? So the whole sentence, or the whole part that says don't be afraid or scared of them, acknowledges the threat, right? But it kind of demolishes its power at the same time. And why? Because Yahweh, God himself, goes with you, right? Not an angel, not a symbol, but God himself. Like that gets you amped, right? You could head into anything knowing that, right? And then the portion that he will not fail you nor forsake you is one of the strongest promises in the Bible, right? Forsaking means abandonment, and failing means falling short. God promises he will do neither of those things, right? No circumstance, no failure, and no enemy cancels his nearness to you. And that's huge. And for anyone watching, if you happen to be standing on your edge of the promised land, right? Like a new job, or let's say a health scare, a spiritual fight, maybe a family conflict. I mean, it can be a bunch of different things, or maybe your personal calling, right? I think this verse will speak to whatever situation you might be going into, and and it tells you that God's not sending you into this thing alone, or you're not stepping into whatever it is alone. He's with you. He's by your side, right? And I think that's why I cling to this verse, right? Because it's courage. It's not something that you produce. It's something that God supplies by his presence. So I think a really, really great way to start off all about courage and strength and faith in when facing the things of life, the world, and all it can throw at you, right? Anyways, we're going to move right on. Next up, we got Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. And this one's about God and his command of courage, right? That's what he needs from you. All right. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged, for Yahweh, your God, is with you wherever you go. I mean, once again, that's a reassurance of his presence in your life. And so, obviously, the author of this is Joshua, and God is the one who is speaking, all right? And this is during Joshua's moment of taking over leadership after Moses' death. And, the whole theme is basically, courage for your calling, right? And so theologically, courage is a command, first of all. It's not a feeling. God is commanding you to be courageous rather in any circumstance you're faced with, right? He wants to build you up. He wants to strengthen you. And his presence should eliminate all the basis for fear, right? And, wherever you go includes certain places that might be painful. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's the highs or the lows or anything you might face, good or bad, right? And the main thing here is God equips those that he calls, right? So, being commanded to be courageous isn't all that bad because, God is leading you in whatever situation you're in, right? So I think this verse matters because it's one of Scripture's clearest declarations that courage is not really optional. It's commanded, right? And not because God expects us to manufacture bravery in our day-to-day lives, but because courage is a natural response when we truly understand who walks with us, right? Like, it's just obvious. Why would we not be courageous knowing that we have, God with us at all times, right? And I think if you think about the fact that Joshua is stepping into Moses' shoes here, like pretty impossible shoes, right? Pretty massive shoes to fill. And the whole nation of Israel is watching, right? I mean, that's some scary stuff. The land is waiting for their entry, and there are going to be battles that are coming for sure. And God doesn't say, hey, Joshua, you got this. He says, Joshua, I'm with you, right? And, that's the real reason I think fear loses its grip in Joshua's case, right? It's because it's just that knowledge of knowing that it doesn't matter where I go or what I'm faced with, he's going to be there with me. So the whole don't be afraid and don't be discouraged, fear speaks to internal threats, right? And discouragement speaks to internal weakness. And God addresses both of these, okay? He knows that some of the biggest battles don't happen around us. They actually happen inside of us, right? And, the portion of for Yahweh, your God is with you wherever you go is one of the most comforting phrases in the Bible. Not wherever you want, not wherever you're feeling strong, but wherever you go, right? Into battle, into uncertainty, into changes, into new territory, into the storm. It does not matter. He is there with you, right? So that's it. I think this verse matters to, believers just because I think a lot of us doubt our ability to handle things that are ahead of us, right? And the uncertainty of things that are ahead of us. Maybe you feel underqualified, maybe you feel underprepared, overwhelmed. I felt that in many circumstances in life, right? And I think Joshua felt the same, right? So we can relate to him in this circumstance. But courage doesn't come from self-confidence. You got to remember that. It comes from God's confidence, And, for anyone watching, if you're facing decisions or seasons that look intimidating to you, And maybe not right now, but maybe in the future. I mean, this verse does shift the focus. The size of the challenge doesn't matter when the size of your God is understood, right? Like he's big enough for any situation. And so this verse really just teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear, it's the presence of God. All right. So a beautiful verse, moving right along. Okay, I'm going to get into a psalm here. Psalm 27, verse 1. This one's kind of about the Lord is my light and my salvation. And we all know that that's just the truth. Okay. Yahweh is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Yahweh is the strength of my life. Whom shall I be afraid? So this is King David, and he's running from enemies, and facing conflict in this portion of his life, right? And he's feeling fear and uncertainty and danger all around him. And I guess you would say that this verse is kind of about confidence rooted in God's character, right? And theologically, God is light in confusion, right? Like he lights the path when we're unsure. And God is salvation in danger. He's going to bring us through. He's the reassurance of that, right? And he is our strength when we feel weak or unequipped for that battle. And faith reframes fear by remembering just who God is, right? So, I mean, why does this verse matter? Well, it's a pretty bold declaration of someone who is clearly has every earthly reason to be afraid at this moment in his life, right? Yet chooses faith anyways, And David's faced war, betrayal, famine, and opposition, and fear was a normal part of his life, safe to say. But instead of allowing fear to dominate his narrative, he starts this psalm by proclaiming who God is, right? Yahweh is my light, right? Like, and lights, well, they reveal the path when everything seems dark, right? That's obvious. And light exposes lies. Light brings hope, right? And when you don't know what's coming next, God becomes the clarity you need. And I think that's what they're trying to say there. And Yahweh is my salvation. It's like David doesn't say God provides salvation, though he does, right? He says God is salvation, right? Courage comes from the belief that God himself is the rescuer, okay? And Yahweh is the strength of my life. Well, David is acknowledging his human weaknesses, right? And strength is not self-generated. It's received from God. And then the portion of for whom shall I fear? It's not a denial of danger. It's the realization if God is who he says he is, what force can truly defeat me, right? And I think we can all take that and kind of, whenever we're facing something, internalize it, right? And this verse matters because fear thrives in the darkness, right? But when God becomes your light, and your salvation and your strength, I mean, fear cannot control your story. And this psalm reminds all of us that courage doesn't come from pretending the enemy isn't real. That's not courage at all. It comes from knowing that God is far greater than the enemy or whatever you're facing. So that's a beautiful, beautiful verse. And moving right along. Okay, this is another psalm. This is Psalm 46, verse 1. And this one is about God being our refuge and our strength. Okay, so God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Short and sweet and right to the point. This psalm is said to be written by the sons of Korah, right? And it's definitely written during a national crisis of some sort, right? And the theme kind of touches on God's protection in chaos, like a lot of the verses have so far. And the tone kind of is like a calm reassurance, right? Just feel it out. God is our refuge and strength and a very present help in trouble. It's just kind of calming, right? And so theologically, God is a refuge, right? A safe place in danger. We can all agree. And God is a strength, right? A power in weakness. And God is very, very present, right? Not distant, delayed, or disengaged. He's always with you. And trouble does not cancel God's presence, right? Not at all. But it does give an opportunity for God to show his presence in your life, right? And it gives you an opportunity as well to engage with him, right? So This psalm is kind of a declaration of stability, really, in a world full of instability. And the psalm goes on to describe earthquakes and mountains collapsing, nations raging, and metaphors of just total chaos, right? But verse 1 anchors the believers before chaos ever unfolds, right? It kind of really does let you know, like, it's all good, even in spite of everything I'm about to say. Now, the portion God is our refuge, it's not our last resort, not our emergency exit, but God is the place that we run to first, not last, right? God is our strength. He's not the supplement when we are weak, right? He's the entire source of strength itself, okay? When your strength runs out, his begins, okay? Something to understand there. And then the portion, a very present help in trouble. God is present in trouble, not just after trouble. He doesn't meet you on the other side of it, you know? He walks with you in the middle of it, all right? Something to internalize and remember. He's always with you, right? It's an overarching theme. And for anyone listening or watching, I mean, I think this verse speaks powerfully to anyone facing maybe a sudden crisis, whether it be health, panic attacks, financial emergencies, relationship breakdowns. You know, the world tells them, you know, be strong, but Scripture kind of reframes it and just says, God is your strength. All right. And this verse matters because it tells us that God is not distant from our pain, right? He's not watching from heaven, hoping you make it, you know, that he's active and he's present and intimately involved in every detail of our struggle, you know. And this psalm is beloved because it gives permission to be honest about trouble while being confident in God. It doesn't say trouble won't come. It says God doesn't leave when it does. So it's an absolute beauty. Okay, moving on. Next one's a good one, Isaiah 40:31. And this one's about renewed strength. And it's from hope in God. That's where you're getting this renewed strength. It's from the hope in God. Okay, so let me bust it out. But those who wait for Yahweh will renew their strength. They will mount up on wings like eagles. They will run and not be weary. They will walk, but they will not be faint. And Isaiah obviously wrote this, right? And he was speaking to Israel, who was weary from suffering and exile and just hardships, right? And he's just trying to, you know, the tone is basically he's trying to encourage the Israelites after hardship, right? And he's basically trying to say that God restores the weary, right? So theologically, you know, hope in God produces supernatural strength. Yeah, he does give us supernatural strength, and he came here to do such as that. And you know, the waiting, you know, is a trusting and expecting and leaning on God during seasons of waiting, right? And God will lift us beyond our own natural ability, right? And strength from God empowers long, difficult seasons. So he gives us what we need to get through in the hard points in our life, right? And I think this verse really matters because it's one of the most uplifting promises for those who feel physically, emotionally, or spiritually exhausted, right? Israel was crushed by exile, tired, discouraged, and unsure if God still even cared, right? So into that despair, though, Isaiah kind of delivers a message that changes everything, right? Kind of just lays it out there. Like, God renews the strength of those who are waiting on him, right? And I think that's exactly what they needed to hear in that season, right? And waiting is not passive, though, either. You got to know that. You know, it's trusting, right? It's hoping. It's looking to God. It's refusing to give up, right? And when believers, like when anyone shifts their hope from themselves to God, an exchange kind of happens, I would say, you know, their weakness for his strength, right? And that's what I mean. It's like a supernatural gift, basically, right? And so the portion of this verse that says they will mount up with wings like eagles, I mean, this kind of describes like a divine elevation of sorts, like God lifting you above the circumstances that once held you down, right? And then the portion that says they will run and not be weary. I mean, for long seasons that require endurance, God supplies what human strength just can't, right? And the portion that says they will walk and not be faint. I think the walking kind of represents your daily life, ordinary obedience, right? And God sustains even in the mundane, right? And this verse matters because many of us feel guilty of being tired, right? Like life can be uh, tiring and weary or wearisome, right? But God isn't disappointed with the weary, okay? He refreshes us. That's what he will do. Exhaustion is not a sign of failure by any means. It's just an invitation for God to renew and to lean on him in those moments when maybe you can't rely on your own strength. That's where he is there to pick up the slack, so to speak, right? So for anyone watching and who feels like they're barely walking or are running and others are soaring, I mean, I think this verse kind of reassures all that God meets you where you are, right? And strength isn't something you earn, it's something God gives when you trust in him. So another beauty. And just I think a lot of these are great to internalize because they're just, when you can remember them when you are going through it, man, like, I don't know, there's something about it just gets me jacked up in a good way, of course. Okay, moving on. Next, we got Nahum chapter 1, verse 7. And this one's about the Lord and how good he is and how he's a refuge in times of trouble, right? And we can all agree on that. Yahweh is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knows those who take refuge in him. So, as I said before, the author is Nahum, and it takes place in Judah, and Judah is threatened by the brutal Assyrian Empire. Like, they were ruthless, and I mean, the theme is just about God's justice against the oppressors and protection of his people, right? And I think he was directing this at anyone that was fearful, oppressed, or discouraged, which probably would have been most of Israel at that point in time. Theologically, though, this is about God's goodness and how it's active, not abstract. How God is the stronghold, a safe, fortified refuge. And God knows also those who intimately, those who trust in him. He knows you very well. And that trouble does not negate, God's care for you. So I think this verse really matters because it's like a warm lamp glowing inside a kind of a dark book. Because Nahum prophesied judgment on Nineveh, right? And a violent superpower that terrorized entire nations, including God's people, in the middle of this frightening historical backdrop. God speaks a word of comfort, right? Yahweh is good. He is a stronghold, and he knows those who take refuge in him, right? And, this verse isn't necessarily promising you that trouble won't come, because it will. It's a promise that when it does, God himself becomes a fortress, right? And the imagery here is kind of powerful. Like, a stronghold is a fortified, defensible tower, right? Unshakable and immovable. And while enemies rage and circumstances shift, God's protection remains firm. So it's a very, very powerful imagery, right? The portion that says he knows those who take refuge in him means more than intellectual awareness. The knows in Hebrew implies deep care and attention, okay, and involvement. God doesn't just know about you, he knows you intimately, personally, and lovingly, really. And he recognizes your trust, your tears, and your faith-filled steps towards him. He recognizes that. He sees these things, right? And for anyone watching, anyone feeling overwhelmed, by forces outside of your own control, or spiritual attacks, stress, injustices, betrayal, or even just anxiety, this verse does offer reassurance that God is not distant, right? and he's not ignoring your struggle at all. And the goodness of God is not diminished by the presence of trouble at all. If anything, it's a time for God to show you just how strong he is and just how much of a presence he can be in your life, right? And so this verse teaches that God's people can run towards him in crisis, not away, right? And when the world feels unsafe, God becomes the safe place, right? And when it feels unstable, God is the one steady foundation that you can turn to. And this verse matters because we need to know that God is not only mighty, but that he is good. He's not only just, he is near. And he doesn't just rescue, he protects us, he shelters us, right? And deeply knows those who seek him for that refuge, right? So really, really beautiful, beautiful verse. Someone to take to the bank, so to speak. Okay, moving on. Psalm 34, verse 17. This one's about God hearing you and delivering you, okay? All right. The righteous cry, and Yahweh hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. So this psalm was written by David, and sometime after escaping from King Abimelech, I can't pronounce that, but I tried, by pretending madness. And this is in 1 Samuel. And, he's feeling fear and humiliation and desperation. And the theme behind it is kind of God's attentive deliverance, And theologically, God hears the prayers of his people. That's what this is trying to say. And deliverance is God's active intervention, right? Trouble is real, but temporary. And crying out in faith is not weakness. It's often what will bring you protection, what will bring you courage, what will bring you safety in those moments where you don't feel any of that, right? And this psalm is a verse filled with raw honesty, okay? And deep comfort, I believe. I mean, David wrote it after one of the lowest, most humiliating moments in his life, right? Running for survival at the time, acting insane to escape death, and hiding in caves, right? And from that vulnerable place, he discovered something life-changing, right? When the righteous cry out, God hears, right? Not might hear, not sometimes hears, but God hears, right? And more than that, he delivers. So, and the beauty of this verse is that it doesn't deny the existence of trouble. It acknowledges it openly, but it reframes trouble as something God ultimately rescues his people from, right? And trouble does not define the believer's story, okay? God's deliverance does, and the portion delivers, right? Them out of all their trouble doesn't mean that moment you pray, the trouble ends instantly, okay? It's not going to just be like, right? It doesn't happen that way. But God's deliverance comes in forms we often don't expect, right? Strength to endure the situation, maybe, wisdom to navigate the situation, protection from unseen dangers, maybe comfort in sorrow, or breakthroughs at the exact right moment, right? So there's different ways it might show up. It's not just, one size fits all. And this verse matters because it gives us permission to cry out to God, and crying out to God is not lack of faith. It is faith, right? It is the refusal to suffer in silence, right? It's choosing God as the first response, not the last resort, okay? And this psalm reassures us that no cry to God is ignored, okay? No suffering is wasted, and no trouble has the final word. So I really love this one. David just delivered psalm after psalm after psalm, and they're all brilliant. All right, moving right along. I got a few to get through here. Isaiah 43, verse 2. And this one's about God with you through fire and water, thick and thin, right? So, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they will not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, and flame will not scorch you. So, Isaiah wrote this, and he was speaking to Israel, Israel is facing judgment, exile, and restoration. And, there's kind of like cool imagery with the water, like, as in like overwhelming trials and fire, which is like consuming hardships, right? So really cool imagery there. And the overall theme is God's presence in our sufferings, right? So theologically, God's promise is not the escape from the trials, but his presence in the trials. And, you know, just because you're suffering, it doesn't mean you've been abandoned. That's not the case at all. Okay. You know, God guarantees survival even in overwhelming circumstances. Hard seasons become holy places when God is present, right? And this verse matters because it's one of the strongest promises in the entire Old Testament, because it does not pretend that life is easy, right? It doesn't say if you pass through waters or if you walk through fire. It says when you do, okay? As in, trials are inevitable, right? But the destruction is not. So, I mean, this verse is God's declaration that no matter what life throws at you, he's not leaving you alone in that storm, okay? And you know, waters are going to rise. They may rise, no, they will rise, but they won't drown you out, right? And fires may burn around you, but they won't consume you, right? Because the Holy One of Israel walks with you into every battle, every valley, every heartbreak, every loss. It doesn't matter the situation, he's there with you. And this kind of changes how we see suffering. I mean, with God present, trials become testimonies. In my scenario, it's like, yeah, like he was there with me, and he's there with me, continuing to be there for me in every circumstance, in every painful scenario. And pain then has a way of becoming a molding feature, and fire becomes refining, because what was going to be overwhelming waters, become like a rite of passage into something new, like God building your resilience to face these things easier anyways. And I think this verse matters because we often think that hardship means God is displeased, like he is making this happen to us. He is unhappy with us. But Isaiah is reminding us that God's presence isn't proven by our comfort. You understand? It's proven by his nearness in the discomfort, right? You understand? Isaiah assures everyone that the storm will not win, is essentially what's being said here. You will pass through it. You will not be abandoned, okay? And God himself will ensure you survive what was meant to destroy you, okay? So just because you're going through it does not mean God has forsaken you, or that he is the cause of this. He's going to be with you through it. And I guarantee on the other end of it, you will be a better person for it, stronger, more resilient. And I, for one, can really, really speak to that, because I feel like I have gone through seasons of drowning and fire and all of that. And what was produced on the other end of that, realizing that God was with me through it all, was just a different version of myself that I think God wanted me to be refined into becoming. And the same will be said for you in any scenario or circumstance that you may be faced with. He's present with you. Just remember that. Okay, sorry. Back to this. Psalm 55, verse 22. Cast your burdens on the Lord. Okay, so here we go. Cast your burden on Yahweh, and he will sustain you. He will never allow the righteous to be moved. Okay, so once again, the psalm is written by our main man, David. And this is during a time when he was experiencing betrayal from a close friend of his. And the emotions kind of behind it are heartbreak and maybe emotional overload, like this is just too much. And once again, kind of speaking to how God sustains the weary in seasons of sadness and heartbreak and emotional overload. Logically, just kind of showing us that God invites us to throw burdens onto him, right? He can take it, he can handle it, and that God sustains. He carries what we can't when we just don't have the strength, right? And the righteous, those who belong to God, that's you and me, right? And that stability comes from God, not from human strength, okay? So that's a theological ideas from this verse. And this verse matters because it's like a healing verse for anyone carrying emotional or spiritual weight that feels unbearable, you know. And David wrote this during a season of betrayal, not by an enemy, but by someone close to him, right? So the emotional pain was deeper than a physical attack. And into that pain, you know, David discovered something pretty profound, right? That God wants your burden. He literally wants it. He wants to take it from you. The portion saying cast doesn't mean gently hand it over. It means hurl it. It means throw it. It means drop with force. God doesn't need your burden neatly packaged. Like, here you go. You know, yeah, he wants the messy prayers. The overwhelmed emotions, the raw honesty. He invites all of it, right? He's a tough God. He can handle your undeveloped prayers and your moments of hardship. He understands it. He sees it. Of course, he can handle it, right? And he invites all of it. So the portion that says he will sustain you is one of the most comforting promises in scripture, right? God doesn't just lift your burden, he lifts you. He becomes the strength that you lack, right? The stability you need and the support you didn't know was really available to you, right? And for anyone watching, I think this verse speaks to those who hide their pain, right? Or that carry everything alone and keep everything buttoned up and to themselves, right? Or feel pressure to stay strong, right? And while the world is saying to you, hold it together, God is just saying to you, cast it on me, right? You don't have to turn into a boiling kettle, right? Like, just give it to me. I'll take that for you. So pretty beautiful. That portion that says he will never allow the righteous to be moved, means God will not let trouble uproot your identity, you know, or your calling or your faith. You know, you may bend, but you will not break. Okay. You may shake, but you definitely won't fall apart. Okay. And this verse, it matters to me because it teaches that burdens are not meant to be managed. They're meant to be transferred. Right. And strength doesn't come from carrying everything. All right. It comes from surrendering everything. And honestly, we get that twisted. And if we got that correctly, life would be a bit more smooth. And this psalm offers permission, comfort, and liberation, in my opinion. You know, you don't have to carry this anymore. God will carry it for you. And it's just a simple instruction to just throw it on him. He can handle it. In fact, he wants you to do that, right? He's there for that purpose. And it doesn't make you weak, right? Not at all. So beautiful verse. And moving right along. 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 17. This one's about standing still and watch God fight for you, right? Just be in awe of the fact. You will not need to fight in this battle. Set yourselves, stand still, and see the salvation of Yahweh with you. Don't be afraid nor be dismayed, for Yahweh is with you. So this is King Jehoshaphat, and he's facing overwhelming enemy armies, right? And Judah is completely outnumbered and powerless in this scenario. And God is speaking through a prophet. And the theme here is God, fights battle. Believers definitely can't win alone. But God will just take the reins and he'll make it happen, right? And this is just showing us that, some battles belong exclusively to God and should have nothing to do with us, right? And sometimes faith just means standing still, not striving, nothing, just taking your hands off the reins, right? And knowing that this is just foundational. God's presence guarantees victory every time. And fear is addressed. It has to be addressed before a miracle can take place in your life. So kind of theological meaning behind this verse. And I think this is one of the most encouraging declarations for believers that are facing battles that they just can't win. The king in this scenario and Judah were surrounded by enemies. They were outnumbered, unprepared, and terrified, right? And they had no military advantage. They had no strategy. They had no backup plan, but they had God, right? And that right there was enough. And God tells them something shocking, right? You will not need to fight in this battle. Like, huh? What do you mean? Sure, what? Right? And that doesn't mean that believers will never act. Doesn't mean we will never act, right? It means sometimes the battle is too big for human strength, okay? And God himself steps in as the warrior. So the portion saying, stand still and see the salvation of Yahweh teaches something revolutionary to us. That faith sometimes means watching, right? Not working, just trusting, not striving. Maybe positioning yourself, not panicking, right? And this might resonate with people who are feeling outmatched, those facing spiritual warfare, financial threats, legal battles, emotional overwhelm in their life, or situations completely beyond our control, right? I mean, sometimes God just calls you to fight, and sometimes he calls you to stand still, right? So the portion saying, don't be afraid nor dismayed, is repeated because fear attacks the mind before the enemy attacks the body, right? And God claims the heart before he conquers that circumstance. He wants to know that you are solid with him before he takes care of business, right? So beautiful. And this verse matters because it teaches believers that God is not only a comforter, right? He is a defender, a warrior, a God who fights for his people when they cannot fight for themselves. That's beautiful, right? So this verse tells us that deliverance doesn't depend on our ability. It depends on God, and he's with you, right? So it's really, really quite beautiful. Personal favorites, whenever you're facing, any hardships, when you're looking for strength and courage, you just got to remember that, like, this overarching theme is that, God is with you in every circumstance. And just because you're facing trouble or hardship does not mean that God is angry with you or abandoning you. That's not the case at all, right? I think a lot of these verses speak to, they're kind of counterintuitive, but understand that, God doesn't always want you to fight. Sometimes he wants to take the battle on exclusively by himself. Sometimes he wants you to go through hardships and stuff like that to build you up as well, right? But the main overarching theme, I would say, is to just lean on God in all circumstances, that good, bad, the ugly, right? Anyways, I hope you got something. Thanks a lot for anyone that dropped by and joined. It means the world to me. God bless. Deep peace. I'm trying to adjust to the camera there. All right, guys. Thanks a lot.